Well, it looks like Indiana's playoff hopes are completely done as they got rolled by Ohio State 38-15. A lot of sloppy mistakes, a lot of issues, a lot of errors played into a game where it felt like they were not even there. They had a really nice, strong drive where they scored to open the game, and then Ohio State started to just slowly chip away. There were a lot of bad special teams errors. There were a lot of bad protection errors that led to Indiana getting dominated as badly as they did on the road. The bigger talking point here is less about the performance and more about the playoff implications. What the heck do you do with Indiana after the way that they played on the road against the second best team in the country? I would argue, and I am sad to say this, but I think that they might be pushed out of the playoff conversation. I think what does help them, and we're going to end up getting to this, is that Ole Miss losing does give them a little bit of grace. But right now, Indiana is on the fringe. They're one of the last teams that are either going to be in or one of the first teams that is going to be out. You couldn't have showed up and played the way that you did, where you're getting completely outmuscled, outmanned, ran over on every single passing down. It just does not look good for an argument to say that this team is worthy and can put up a competitive performance in the playoff.
Yeah, Ohio State had a really good day. The pass rush that they were dialing up on third down was brilliant. Why not? Make a beat you in man coverage. They couldn't do that, and we're going to sack you 5 times. That was fantastic. Like seeing Caleb Downs' punt return. That's why you bring him to Ohio State. That's why you pay that man. He is an uber-talented player. I'd like to handle this cordially, though, Joe. Why are we leaving out a one-loss team that just lost to the national champs like that?
Okay, all right, stop. That last part was completely. No.
I said cordially. They're the clear and obvious favorite, and they look like the best team.
Cordially does not
and week. I'm trying to approach it cordially, and I'm letting you know.
Stop saying the word cordially. I don't know if you're whatever. They're not the national champs. I think that one thing we've been very clear and apparent in this season is that there's no clear favorite to win the national championship this year. I don't think Ohio State played a great football game and they kicked the crap out of them, but I still don't think that they are a completely clear and balanced team. I still think that their offensive line issues and injuries that they've suffered are going to catch up to them. So I don't think that's fair to throw out there that they're just de facto national champion because they beat Indiana in this game.
I'm not saying it's because they simply beat Indiana. The way that they did it was very impressive. One of the most dominant wins of the season.
Well, what game solidified it for you? The Nebraska game? Was that the one that you're like, oh, this one? Yep.
I'm saying this game today, dummy. This is what I'm telling you. This is the clear favorite. They are the clear favorite. Everyone else in the SEC goes in week after week and doesn't show me this kind of dominance.
Over Oregon, you think that the team that literally beat them is the clear favorite? That's your argument?
You've said it before that you don't want to give teams like this a second chance to play you because then they've already seen you and they can adjust and develop a better game plan.
They're down 2 offensive linemen. Oregon's defensive line is going to eat them up.
Ohio, but why are we knocking Indiana when this is an exceptional Ohio State team?
Okay, that's the better word, not national champion Ohio State.
You're kicking them out. They're clearly the favorite in my mind to win the national championship.
I don't agree with that, but I don't think it's wrong to kick them. I think Ole Miss's loss completely saves them, and that they're still back into the mix here because Ole Miss is getting knocked out. A 3-loss Ole Miss team, the way that they played against Florida, should not get in with also a loss to Kentucky on their resume. But it's hard to make the argument in favor of Indiana when they played the back end of the Big 10. And this is the singular opportunity that they had to put up a fight, and they got smoked.
Did they just scrape by the back half of the Big 10, or did they roll through them as they should, as a playoff team would?
I have been the biggest supporter of that argument coming into this game the entire season. So, like, before anyone wants to cast me as a non-Indiana supporter, I get that. But you can't lose by 23 points. And it's also how they lost. They looked lifeless, and they played so sloppy throughout the entirety of the game outside of the first drive that they had.
I'm not saying they did a lot of things wrong. They should have gotten Tyson Lawton the ball way more. He's way better than his usage rate in this game should have been. But Texas lost to Georgia by 15 points. They got drubbed and had to get just barely scraped back by to make that a somewhat reasonable score at the end of the game. Like we're gonna act like this is the first like blowout loss between ranked teams this year. Well, I can't have that. They're a 1-loss team in the Big Ten. I can't sit here and say that we're throwing them out.
I'm not okay. Hold on. I'm not saying I'm completely removing them and throwing them out. I'm just saying that at the current moment, the argument that supports putting them in after a 23-point loss is now extremely shaky.
I'm saying they're a 1-loss Big Ten team, and it would be very, very suspect to not put them in when they have a good quarterback who didn't play great today, but Rourke's a good quarterback.
68 yards.
I know he had 68 yards. The man coverage was suffocating today. He could barely get the ball out because they were bringing 6 and 7, which they should have. Ohio State coached a better game. I'm going to say that also. First time in a while, I'm going to give some props to Ryan Day and his staff. They did what they needed to do in this game. They played bully ball and didn't let Indiana get rolling, and they were at home. I'm not saying that Indiana would have had another 7 points if they were at home, but you and I both have to realistically look at it. If this game was in Bloomington and those stands were as loud as they would have been in the hypothetical, it wouldn't have been Ohio Stadium gray sky bully action from Ohio State the entire game. It could have been a little bit different. I know we're playing a hypothetical game right now.
That's a big hypothetical to throw out there.
Yeah, at the same time, though, how many times do people talk about the SEC, talk about the night games, or if this was at our house, it would have been different?
I don't know if anyone's ever really classified Indiana's home stadium as
I would agree.
Very daunting road environment. But I think you're oversimplifying the just saying, oh, they are a 1-loss Big Ten team. They just should get in. I feel like that is it's just too oversimplifying of understanding what they've done this season, having watched that game and not seeing a competitive product being placed out there. This is likely Ohio State team that I don't think is going to be a seeded or a bye team in the playoff field. So if they're the 5th seeded team and Indiana's in the mix and they're not that far off, if that's how they play against a team that's only a few seeds above them, I wouldn't have a lot of faith that they're going to show up and play a competitive game. My biggest thing is that if they got matched up with Georgia, with Alabama, I think Tennessee now gets back into the playoff field, with Tennessee, with Texas. I did not see anything that they did today that tells me that they would play competitively and close.
I haven't seen much from the SEC this year that tells me that they have world beater teams that would absolutely run through Indiana. I just haven't. If we're eye testing it, I've seen a lot of sloppy play, bad coaching, and teams that don't take control of the moment.
I think you're taking the Ole Miss performance out on Ole Miss, and just because Ole Miss played sloppy does not mean all these other teams are playing sloppy.
I have words for Ole Miss also, but this is a year where we saw Alabama lose to Vanderbilt. We've seen Kentucky get big wins in the SEC.
But Vanderbilt is a competitive, scrappy, quality team that's over 500 that would beat a majority of the teams in the Big Ten. That loss isn't as bad as everyone thought it was when it happened. Same thing with Alabama's close win over South Carolina. That looked horrible at the time, and at the current moment, that's a really good win. So we need to be able to revise the way that the season played out.
I'm fine with revising it, and my statement still stands, in my opinion, that I haven't seen true SEC dominance. There's not a big bad in that conference. We've seen the parity this year, and I think that having them with 4 in is fair. But if the whole discourse this week was real nasty about the undeserving Indiana team that was 9-0, and we're trying to figure out what the 2-loss teams are and how they can work their way in the bubble. The whole SEC narrative this week, I think we were a little knee jerk into projecting how it would shake out. And I'll say this, a lot of the conversations though were capped at, we'll see what happens between Ohio State and Indiana. So I'll be fair there and note that.
I would argue though, the reason why we can push for having 2 or 3 2-loss SEC teams into the playoff field is that when they're playing those games, they're playing them close. The quote underdog teams in those situations have pulled out upsets because there is still a more competitive range. However, when we created that same exact situation in the Big Ten, an undefeated Big Ten team against a 1-loss Big Ten team, the undefeated team got blown out. That situation has not occurred in the SEC. As much as we want to act like, yes, there's been sloppy play, I would argue that's competitive play. A bunch of teams that were good enough to beat one another, and we're seeing that play out onto the field. That, to me, places more evidence of, on a week-to-week basis, I know that an SEC team is going to come to play. I know an SEC team is going to be able to show up in a road environment and play a close football game, a competitive football game.
Was Georgia playing a close competitive football game when they lost by 18 to Ole Miss? That's not close or competitive. Does that loss look better now? It doesn't. The SEC is not as strong as we're making them out to be. Is it competitive? Yeah. And is the SEC parity there? Yeah. But at the same time, there's not somebody in this conference that I'm looking down the barrel and saying, we got to watch out for them any more than I am with Ohio State.
But this is where the conversation's getting lost. You're only looking for a premier team in the conference. This is one of the few times in SEC history that we have 4 really good teams that any of them could win the SEC if they got the chance to play in the SEC championship game. All 4 of those teams are good teams. They're all better than Indiana if they matched up with Indiana and played them on the field right now.
I think Tennessee would be a little closer than people would expect because they've been having some offensive woes. And I think Indiana's run defense showed some really bright spots today. And that's what they have going for themselves at Tennessee right now.
Did you say Indiana's run defense showed some bright spots?
Yeah, I thought they tackled well in the open field at times in the first half.
Is that the good job sticker that you earn for getting gashed by them? They got ran over by them.
I just said they had some good open field tackles in the first half. Or do you just tune out after the first 3 seconds of what I said?
No, I'm not tuning out what you're. I feel like that's a little bit of a pat on the head. All right, we're going too long on this one.